we have Marisa Ramirez in the house. And I am Zach Ritter. I am Interim Associate Dean of Students at Cal State Dominguez Hills. You are tuned into Spotlight Sundays with, so Joe Brooks is the director of Community Works Institute. You should check out communityworksinstitute.org. That's where you'll find all the professional development opportunities you could ever hope for. Communityworksinstitute.org. I've presented at some of their institutes. Check out their website. They have cool institutes coming up where you can learn about bringing the classroom to the community and the community to the classroom, and a lot of interesting ethnography opportunities, DEI work, justice work, and yeah, check it out. You might like it. Marisa, she and I met at a New Leaders Council, NLC, which is a like a political organization that's really pretty cool. Young progressives in Los Angeles and throughout the country. And she was the leader of that group that I was in. But she does much more than that, right? She was a 7th and 8th grade teacher. She is now a coach. Well, you tell the folks all the cool things that you do. I don't want to ruin it. So tell us, who are you?
Yeah. No, thank you for having me. It's great to be here with you, Zach, and appreciate the Community Works Institute for hosting this space. Yeah, so like you said, I started my career as an educator, like formal career, had started working when I was 15 and doing lots of different things, especially worked a really long time as a food server. So shout out to, the folks who come up through the restaurant industry and the food service industry for sure. But really grateful that I found education as a college student. I started volunteering at a nonprofit in the city of Boston where I went to college, and just really fell in love with wanting to do better for students of color, and really drew on my own educational experience of the challenges that I faced in my public school education. So that brought me to starting as a teacher, 7th and 8th grade language arts and writing. And then it evolved. I really loved the college process and making sure students got connected to the college process and saw how much was missing there, and that support for students, and to really realize what were their dreams and passions beyond high school. So transitioned into the college access space and worked at a few different educational nonprofits. Most recently, was the founding site director of a program in the Watts area of Los Angeles. And now am working as a consultant and a leadership coach, and really focusing on creating spaces of belonging, creating incredible experiences, both on the education side, but even more broadly, just focusing on program design and meeting space design. And when we bring people together, what do we want that experience to be? And how do we want folks to connect and relate and talk about difficult things? So I really am grateful for the journey that I've had and where I'm at now. And of course, a part of that was also, you mentioned New Leaders Council, and leading that space was wonderful because it brought me to many incredible people like yourself.
Well, thank you. I didn't even pay you to say that, so I appreciate you. You've also done some powerful work around Latino Community Foundation and Latin American Leadership Academy. You tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So those were two experiences that I was a part of. So I was a part of the Latino Community Foundation, does incredible work here in the state of California, really connecting community-based organizations to funds. And so in Los Angeles, And throughout the state, they have giving circles where folks can decide to say, you know what, let's leverage our dollars collectively to invest in incredible organizations that are serving the Latinx community. So here in LA, a group of leaders got together, and I was grateful to be a part of that community. I'm no longer participating, but the Latino Community Foundation and the LA Giving Circle continues to raise funds and to really give direct grants to some awesome organizations in Los Angeles that are having a really great impact.
Cool.
So that's the Latino Community Foundation. They also do incredible policy work and voter rights work. So they are just a wonderful organization. And the Latin American Leadership Academy was a program that I just like educator networks that got like onto my radar, and they had an inaugural boot camp in 2019 in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And I was really excited to be selected and to participate in that. I would just like an incredible group of educators and folks in all walks of life and career experiences to just come together and learn and talk about educational experiences in the broader context of Latin America. So yeah, that was really, really great. And they focus on leadership academies for youth. So this was in 2019, it was their first time bringing together educators to supplement the work that they were doing with the youth across, the two continents.
Cool. So tell us about I want to get to a lot of different interesting things. The food industry, I think the first thing you mentioned, there's a lot that one learns by working in the food industry. Like for some of the K through 16 educators who are listening, what are some of the things that you learned in that space that maybe has helped you throughout your career?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think so much. I was my grandparents, something that they were able to do in the 1960s here in the LA area was start a very small walk-up restaurant. It was just a window. And so that's where I was really able, like growing up in that restaurant environment and just seeing how that really supports family and supports community. And so I think that idea, especially of like small family run businesses and restaurants, that idea of really like investing in community and working collaboratively with community, I think is something that was at my foundation. And I think, as educators, really just connecting to community is so important, outside of the classroom, outside of like the campus, and really, just like understanding the lives of the incredible people that are, in the classroom every day. And I think you see that too, and just like not making assumptions, like folks who come into the restaurant, there's so many different types of people that you're meeting and that you're connecting with, and they're each bringing their own experiences, their, bad days, their good days, their all their energy. And so I think it's really like similar to, how students come in to a space and, they bring everything with them. And so like, how do you just honor all of the things that they're bringing with them, and knowing that you're having, you're getting a chance to have human interactions and human relationships and build connection. And I'm grateful that I was able to do that from a young age, and even to, my mid-20s, I was still working as a server off and on. Because it's just can be really fun to connect with different people.
I went to a restaurant outside, like as COVID restrictions were lifted, and it was just this like euphoric experience because the waiter was like, am I talking too much? Like, is this okay? Like, I haven't interacted with people in a long time. This is an amazing experience. We're like, no, it's great. Like, we really like sharing ideas. And it was just like this really human moment. And I think, yeah, there's a lot that happens in those interactions that we don't often think about. And that's pretty dope that your parents were like having a walk up in like the 60s. And like, I'm sure yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of stories there of like, you know, yeah, LA in the 60s was a unique place to be, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Tell us about teaching. Uh, is it seventh and eighth grade?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah. Oof. Well, it feels so long ago now. It was 2007 to 2009. So right out of college is when I started. And, I was learning right alongside with the incredible young people that I had the privilege of working with. And it was hard. It was really, really hard for many different reasons. It was hard leaving a really incredible community that I had built in undergrad, especially a community of color, and going into a very predominantly white space in terms of my school. Although our students were not predominantly white, they're predominantly Black, Latino, and Asian. And so it was just so many layers, like me learning about myself, trying to find my footing as a teacher, as a professional, just making an adjustment personally to being in a new city, in a new space where I didn't have that sense of community. And yeah, I think I just grew a lot. I think my students saw a lot of that growth, but yeah, they were such great. They're such great people. Thankfully, I'm still in touch with some of them from those first 2 years, and they just really like taught me so much. I maybe even more than I taught them. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But yeah, it just really like it was exciting. And like, how do you get them to learn and be interested in all this information? And I was really intentional about connecting to curriculum and topics that were important to me, and I felt like important to the development of especially of young people of color, like learning about developing a sense of critical consciousness. So trying to do that as much as I could within the restrictions that we had of standardized testing and like mandated, state standards and mandated curriculum, mandated disciplinary programs that I felt were actually pretty dehumanizing. Um, and so it was like, how do I find my voice as an educator and like push back against these things that just did not sit well with me? And then how do I just like learn how to do what I need to do for these young people that need to be prepared for life? So it was a lot. But yeah, like I said, I'm really grateful for the experience.
Mm. And where was this?
Avondale, Arizona. Yep, the Littleton School District. So just right outside of Phoenix proper.
Mm. So K through 16 educators who might be listening in on our session, what what advice would you give them? Maybe they're a white teacher, maybe they're a teacher of color, but they're working in these places that kind of dehumanize folks, right? And like do have this built-in like white supremacy, but also like just toxic, I don't know, corporate culture that comes along with it, Eurocentric curriculum, like all these assumptions of neurotypicality, all these things. What are some of the things that you did that were that really hit home with the students that folks listening in on the session might be interested in?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think there's definitely some things I can share that I think, like you said, hit home with the students, that created this a sense of belonging for them. But I also want to, well, I do want to acknowledge, that I was still learning. And I think that there's things that I did that still perpetuated, some of these inequities and the way that the broader education system is just set up to get students to survive, and not really thrive. And so it's not that I was just doing all of these incredible things. I was still working within this framework that, even at the time, I didn't have the language or even like the visibility into, how I was participating in some of these things. But I think overall, it was always really important to me, just given my experiences, my background, that I was like showing up with love, for the students first and foremost. And I, would let students know that I loved them, that they were important, that they mattered, and that that they weren't going to just be like a number in terms, or like, a grade that they needed to get, or a GPA. That I wanted to, learn about their interests and learn about their families, and just affirm them and who they, are, and who they were becoming, and the things that they were going through. And so I think, as a teacher, and then as I did college counseling, and then worked on the college access and success side of things, just really letting the students know at any point, whether they were 7th and 8th grade or college students, because I worked with a lot of college students too, that that they're good enough, and that they have everything within them already to be successful, that they don't need to be fixed. They might need access to something, or they might need a little bit more like watering or nourishment, but that they're whole and that they're enough just as is. And I think especially for students of color, like hearing that message is so important, because a lot of times we get into spaces and we just question whether we should belong, or, question like if we're smart enough, or capable enough, or all of these things, like the messages that we're getting from these systems of oppression. And so I think that was always really important to me as an educator, and just like really showing that love and affirmation. And even while doing that, there was still things that I was perpetuating, in terms of like the tests, and making, and like really like wanting to get students prepared for that, or even the whole college admissions process that's so messed up and just complicated, and like teaching students how to play that and how to survive in that setting. So I think there's a lot of things I would do different, but I think there's a lot of things that I'm also proud of.
Hmm. Hmm. I feel like there's something that we didn't, I don't know, explore or excavate with the walk-up restaurant thing. Like, what were some of the lessons that you gleaned and learned from watching your parents go through some of their experiences and struggles?
Yeah. So just to clarify, it's my mom's parents who had the restaurant. It has since closed, unfortunately, about, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. So yeah, I was able to still see, though, even it was my grandparents who were running that business. And just like, I think investing in yourself, I think that's something that I'm realizing more now, in terms of like taking that risk to pursue something that you believe in. Really, really powerful. I feel like to have that in my ancestry and like lineage of folks who like go for things. Yeah, really love that. I think in terms of my my parents' experience, this is a little bit different from the restaurant piece. I think one thing that their experience, they both grew up primarily in the Los Angeles area, in the South Bay area, like Carson, San Pedro, like And they spoke Spanish as their first language, but they would get in trouble if they spoke Spanish in public school when they were growing up in the 1960s and 1970s. And so they really came up with this idea of assimilation. And that was the primary goal. They needed to become American, which is code for become white, and like really like bought into that because of experiences of discrimination, both that they faced, but also my grandparents, because my grandparents also grew up in the States. And so they really, had experiences that pushed them, one direction to like try to fit in as much as they could. And so I think for me, I have taken like the opposite route, and like no, I don't want to try to conform or assimilate, or I think there's been a lot of questioning, especially in the last 2 years, of like of values and of just like approaches and language that we use, and how that's informed, my thinking and beliefs, and really trying to, just reorient to what I believe is really important around justice, around liberation, and around the sense that we've been talking about, creating spaces for folks that where they feel good, where they feel seen. And so I think there's really been like a shift for what I think a lot of times what my parents needed to do to survive, and my grandparents, they needed to do to survive. And I feel really grateful to be in a place where, because of ancestors and the people that came before us, that now I can make different decisions, that I can reject these systems that they bought into, and sort of create my own path.
Mm. Mm.
So that wasn't there about the restaurant.
No. That was a lot there. That was perfect. So, okay. You got me thinking about my grandparents had a market downtown, and that was the Holocaust surviving side. So they came from, they went, caught up in the system, and like 13, 14 years old, family died or got murdered. Some went to England. Anyway, they're here in America on their own, and they got sponsored by a Jewish Federation, Joint Distribution Committee. And I think about that a lot. Like, would I be able to cut it? Like, would I be able to make it? Like, no family, like nothing. And I just wrote this op-ed of like, it's kind of like this generational whiplash, because like a lot of Jewish folks have now made it, right, and ascended to whiteness. And it's just like 76 years ago, people were getting murdered, and now it's just like boop. And I don't know, I've just been grappling with that a lot, about like be careful of assimilation. Like there's a lot of as you pointed out, negative stuff of buying into whiteness, even if you're like a white ethnic group, right? So, and I think that informs a lot of the stuff that I do, with like, just, you got to be more authentic and like cut through the BS, and like stop being so corporate and stop being whatever, because we know that toxic corporateness is a slippery slope into dehumanizing people. And we've seen it in Rwanda, we've seen it in Poland, we've seen it in Guatemala, right? Like, we've seen it everywhere. And I think some of that, we were talking on the phone a little bit ago, and you and I were like kind of vibing on this note of, there's all these institutions or check marks that we're supposed to be going toward. And partway along the journey, we're like, WTF are we doing? and I don't know if that's the ancestors speaking. I don't know if it's just that's our conscious speaking, or like, stuff from, I don't know, like, I don't know. Tell us a little bit about how you just made a big change in your life. And I
Yeah.
think it'd be interesting for people to hear, like, you were going on a certain track and then you're like, nah, I'm gonna tap into some of the stuff that my grandparents did and just like go my own route.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that, Zach. Yeah, I think these like moments of really deep reflection are so important in thinking about like all that happened to get us to this point for sure. And I think what you were speaking to really resonated with me about this opportunity to be just like really intentional in terms of examining like what are my values, what's driving me, who do I want to be aligned with in the world, whether that's an organization or friends or partners or how I spend my money.
Yeah.
And just, yeah, really taking a closer look at things and what's important to each of us. And so I think that's the opportunity that I really had to just like pause and say like, wait a minute, like I'm just going in this cycle of, like you said, like, okay, I was an advisor, a teacher, then an advisor, then a director, then like senior director. And so I'm just going on this path and like, is this really what I want? And I was so stressed. I was like very anxious, not sleeping, and just having like my life was consumed by work and in a really toxic work environments of just focused on numbers, focused on results. And so it was this point of, just I think what it comes down to, I believe, is like my own healing journey, and that I've been on this healing journey, and just thinking about, like I said, questioning, and just understanding how systems have lived within me,
Mm.
and systems of like white supremacy work culture. I had internalized like patriarchy, like internalized sexism or capitalism, and how I was like really aligned to just like more and results and expansion. And like, if I'm not productive, then I'm not worth anything. And so just like really questioning these values that we're socialized into, growing up in the States, and um, being able to say like these aren't things for me that I want, that align with who I am and who I'm becoming. I think they were a part of my life, given how we grew up in necessities, even especially like necessities of ancestors and folks who came before, who really had to survive. And so I'm really grateful to be in this place to say like, I want to be aligned to things that I'm choosing, and to work that I want to do. So after a short stint at a job that I just felt like was not for me, after 7 weeks, I said, I don't want to live my life like this. And I want to like, just even being a part of an institution makes me really anxious right now. And so like, what can I do? What can I offer? And how can I be in relationship with incredible people? And it happened that this consulting and coaching piece is what I chose.
Hmm. Hmm. Were you scared?
Yeah. Absolutely, because the job that I had just gotten a new job, and people were like, oh my God, this is so great. Like, fancy title, fancy org, good pay. And so there was a lot of internal struggle for me, even coming to the decision of deciding to leave. And great people that I was working with, amazing team. It just wasn't aligned for what I wanted, or needed, and what I wanted to do with my life. And I was scared to tell my parents because they weren't going to understand. They're like, you're doing what? Like, so I think the most beautiful part of this process of, starting my own business has been the level of like inquiry and like self-awareness that I've been able to build. And yeah, just a lot of learning about who I am, and what's important to me, and where I have a lot of like work to do still, like asking for money, and like is really hard. And as a consultant, like you have to be able to state your fee, and a fee that that feels, like aligned with the work and the service that you're going to provide. And for me, that is something that I felt really uncomfortable doing. And so it's so that I can just like step into my power in a way that I haven't.
Oh, wait, you're sounding lower. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. I think my headphones turned on and did a weird thing for a
Yeah,
second.
no, that's good. So you did, I think you said you were feeling more something about power.
Yeah, just like being able to step into my power in a way. This journey has allowed me to do that in a way that I um, hadn't done before.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, I'm just thinking about, I've done a couple consulting things and I feel like weird about money and like asking like a price, because it just like,
Yeah.
I feel bad charging someone, but also like you have to make a living, but it's like, what is my worth? And I don't know, it's just like a whole weird thing.
Yeah.
And you don't want to like, I don't know, am I overcharging? Am I undercharging? I don't know. Um, what about, so tell us about, yeah, I don't know, tell us about the work right now. Like, is it, I mean, it sounds like you're doing some exciting stuff that is liberatory in that you can go to certain spaces and be like, I mean, you were telling me this on the phone of like, all right, so you have meetings every week, but the meetings, like, it doesn't have to be like, "Ugh," it doesn't have to be so boring or so like monotonous, or like maybe it doesn't have to be every week. Like maybe there should be like play, maybe there should be creativity, maybe there should be like talks about CRT and like, other ideas about gender justice and like economic justice within these spaces. Like, tell us the vision that you're bringing to this work and what it's like.
Yeah. So that, like even just in the short time since October of 2020 that I've been doing this, it's still even been like an evolution of like, what do I want to focus on? What do I really enjoy? And I think that's been part of this process for me, is just like really honing in on what brings me the most joy, because then I think that in working with clients and partners, that they're going to feel that energy too, and what I can bring to the table. So the areas that I focus on are program design. That can be any type of program, education or otherwise. And it can be with youth or with adults. Actually, most of the program design work I'm doing right now is with adults and for adults. And then the other thing that I focus on, which is what you were referencing, is around the meeting space design and facilitation, and just how can we think differently when we're convening people together in meeting spaces, and how can they just not be this like total drain of energy. And then the third thing is the leadership coaching. So working one-on-one with folks who are primarily in social justice spaces, social impact spaces, and thinking about their individual journeys, and then the impact that they're having in their work. So those are, my three focus areas. I have some incredible partners that I'm working with, both in education, but also more broadly in philanthropy and climate change, transportation, and like workers' rights. So it's a pretty broad range of folks, because what I've found is that I can really leverage my background as a teacher, as an educator, and a lot of the ways that just like, having a better understanding of how people learn and how you can like make content relatable to folks. How do we build community and a culture when we think about a program? And I think, a lot of folks have great ideas of different programs or the ways that they want to bring folks together, but they might not have the same background in training in kind of in the way that a lot of folks do, like myself and like you. And yeah, just leveraging that strength to be able to do that in many different industries, not just in addition to education.
So give us a little taste tester of like, what are some of the things that you feel that a lot of orgs are kind of not getting right? Like, what's something, like, I'm sure there's a lot, but what like in terms of leadership, which is oftentimes like we say like healthy leadership, but we really mean like be more like Christian white rich male, right? Like we have these coded languages that we use. So in terms of leadership or the other two that you just mentioned, what are some of the things that we can approach in a more creative way?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so what I really focus on and really try to center for myself first is around equity. And like I said, just thinking about experience and people's experiences and how that informs how they show up in spaces when we come together. So I think for leaders and folks who are, leading teams, even, leading classrooms, just working with people, really, it's really, I think the most critical thing is honoring the humanity of folks and the different experiences. And hopefully people have a really genuine desire to learn about those experiences and to honor those experiences and celebrate them. So it makes me think about intersectionality and really holding an intersectional approach and knowing that we're just not one-dimensional beings, that there are all these different identities and things that make up who we are. And just really taking that intersectional approach is key. And I think the other big thing that I've been thinking about a lot and that I see in some of the spaces that I'm a part of is just, folks want to make this commitment, especially now in this moment that we're in, make a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, making a commitment to anti-racism or, just to change more broadly. And organizations are hiring all these people, but what they're failing to do is the individual work. And really making a deep commitment individually to their journey of examining of how all of these systems live and operate within them and through them. Because like there are things happening on the interpersonal level and the way people communicate, what you were talking about, like these coded languages or coded language, cultural norms. And that just doesn't get examined enough. We might talk about metrics or who we're hiring or like how people, like other results that are being attained. But are we really examining the culture? Are we really examining how we participate in the culture? And I think that has been something really important for me to do and understanding like how I've participated in things and like working with folks, especially in the one-on-one work I get to do is just really like surfacing these like beliefs and mindsets that are under the surface for folks. So that's what I would say, like intersectionality and really doing a deep commitment to the individual work, not just like at the organizational level.
Layla Saeed does Me and White Supremacy book that I've heard some people really like, and that's helping them interrogate their own whiteness and corporateness and all these structures. Are there certain things for the K through 16 educators who are listening of like, oh, dang, I should do that? Where do I start? What would you tell them?
Oh yeah, that's such a good question. Well, I think like, again, just being intentional about what their values are and like digging under the surface is really important. And just like, yeah, being honest too, because it's hard to say that like, man, I've participated in this system that's harmful and it's hard to have that honesty or to sit with that discomfort. And so, but you can't move forward. You can't just brush past that either. And so I think that's a really important part of, especially for educators, especially, educators working with any young people, in particular, young people of color who have been in this system where they have been made to feel like they have to shed who they are in order to be successful. So yeah, I think being really honest about where you're starting from and like having compassion for yourself too, I think is important. A lot of times we're really hard on ourselves and we can be hard on each other. And so I think accountability is important, but also compassion as we're on this journey together to hopefully create something incredible. And so in order to, a lot of folks are using the term liberation now and like talking about this. But if we can't unlearn things, like we're not going to be able to imagine what liberation could even be if we're not unlearning these systems and beliefs and values that have got us to this place. So yeah, do the work, be compassionate to yourself and towards others, but hold people accountable. And it has to go beyond, reading books is incredible, like building that awareness, but then how are you going to put it into practice?
Yeah, this notion of like, if enough people defect from these toxic systems towards more liberatory systems, then we can have a different world, right? Or a different society. But we have to have a critical mass of people that take their chips and go somewhere else, or rethink the idea of having chips because maybe that's not equitable.
Yeah.
You and I met through this political organization, New Leaders Council. Politics and your role in politics, like I think probably you and I have thought of running for an office at one point, or thought of politics as a way to change society for the better. And I'm don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe over our lifetimes we're like, oh yeah, I mean, maybe it's not what we thought it was. And and so tell us a little bit about your maturations with politics, and maybe your own interest in seeing some of the effed up stuff in the classroom, and then maybe in college track, and you can speak a little bit about, you didn't get to talk about the college process and how it's like, all the things, racist, classist, sexist. Tell us about that kind of political journey.
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. I think what I've really embraced is like politics is deeply personal, and it is about people. It's about people. It's about people's bodies, literally, and I feel a lot of times like the history of politics in this country is about like regulating and controlling people. And it's so funny. I was in a family chat and somebody said like, I just want to keep politics out of this. And I was just like so infuriated because, and this is, he's, it's a white male saying this. And I'm just like, I was like having so many reactions because for so many people, in particular, Black, Indigenous, and people of color within the United States, politics has always been deeply personal. It's like who can vote, how, like, what's decided about our bodies, who we can marry, like, just like all of these, like, where we go to school, like all of these things. And so I think growing up, it was like, that just like happens over there. It's like this thing that like I don't really understand. I think it's made so that most people understand it, and it feels very complicated or not accessible to most folks. And so, over the last, I would say like 10 years, really engaging a lot more with like understanding like local politics, understanding like who's on our city councils and who's my state representative, not just the federal level, and knowing that there's really important decisions being made about, every parts of our lives. And so I haven't, I think all of the organizing that has been done in this, the last 4 years to combat these large forces that were, leading the country, it's just been incredible to see more people get involved. yeah, I don't know like what the answer is in terms of, you talked about running for office. I know we need more folks who are aligned to like values of just wanting people to be well. It seems like so much of politics is not interested in having all people be well and thriving.
Mm.
And so how do we get more folks who honor, like, we were saying before around honoring humanity and honoring intersectionality and these very different experiences and often very hard experiences of the folks that have been here in the US.
Mm.
And at the same time, I don't know that like maintaining this political institution, I don't think will we ever get to a liberatory space if we just continue reform. And I think that's so much of what the conversation is around, abolishing the police. It's like we can't reform a system that was predicated and built on white supremacy and built on violence. And so it's like, I think the same goes for the US political system. It's can we really reform a system that at its core is meant to only serve very few and has been incredibly harmful to many, many people in this country. And so I don't have, a vision for what that could look like just yet. But I know there's some incredible organizers and folks who are doing the work to work towards change.
Before we started this call, you and I were talking about the verdict that came out last week, and talking about the political system, talking about the injustice system. I got really sad when it came out, and I thought I would be more happy because they announced that it was going to come out quick. So I was like, okay, it probably means they didn't deliberate too long. So maybe it means he's guilty. But I was talking with my friend today, and she was like, this is accountability, but this is not justice. Because if you really think about the system, taxpayers are now going to pay for this dude to be locked in a cage. There's no transformative justice. George Floyd is not brought back to life. There's no reparations for Black folks, Indigenous folks. There's no mass systemic change in policing. There's no like creative new ideas that have been put into place. Like in England, 90% of police don't have guns, right? Like you could be a terrible police officer, but if you didn't have a gun, like someone's not dying that day, Yeah. I was just sad because I was like, because there was some, I don't want to say white folks. I'm sure there was a lot of folks that were celebrating as if this was a great thing. And it is like a step, but it's so sad that this is considered progress. Yeah. I don't know. What were some of the things that you were thinking about?
Yeah, it's been really heavy, for sure. And I think it was, the word that comes to mind is it was necessary that, he was found guilty. But it's not the end. And I think it was, especially, the verdict coming on the heels of, another murder of another, young person, Ma'Khia Bryant, who, is just this system is, completely horrific. And so it's just, the words are hard to find because it's just like this constant, witnessing and, a feeling of like the weight of all of this and knowing that, all the work that has come since this country was founded, and all of the organizing that has been done for centuries, to work towards change, to build a society that is humanizing, where there's connection to people and to the land in authentic ways. Yeah, there's still, generations of work to be done, I think. And yeah, it's just been tough after, yeah, all of these things continue to happen. And a lot of times it feels like hopeless. And then, I'm, tapping into what we were talking about, the energy of ancestors and all of the people who have come before, who have been, fought so hard. And then, being in community with friends who share the same values, and just knowing that, like, we're incredibly, it's like we're strong, but it's like, why do we always have to be so strong? Like, why do we always just have to, like, okay, we're going to be resilient and like keep fighting? And I'm like, I know that everybody has their own experience, but yeah, I think I'm just kind of going off now, but just being in community and tapping into strength of folks who have come before, to know that, like, we can continue moving forward and still and grieve, and then also find joy at the same time, and create spaces of joy. And that's really, really important. And just remembering that, like, there's so many dimensions to us as humans, and how do we tap into all of those dimensions as we work toward, creating this world that we want to build together.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned joy, because like I was like, I was making you laugh before we came on, right? Like, we were joking and we were being silly, right? And like, and we don't create those spaces to be really like silly.
Yes.
Right. And just like sure, kids, like, they get a rock and they get like this Lego, and then they're like playing, and they let their minds just like grow and do their thing. And then we get to a certain age as adults, and we're like, don't be funny, like, don't be creative, don't play. And I talk about the ancestors, like, I see my father, who was a refugee and came here when he was like super young, but like has a lot of like trauma from his parents, and like there was like abuse, and like verbal and physical, and like he's made it, I mean, obviously this far, but like there's a lot of brokenness that I see in him. And I, like, my reaction to that, and like the Holocaust, and like all this like terrible genocidal stuff that's not obviously not only in the Jewish communities, a bunch of communities, and some argue that there's a genocide, and a couple still going on in America, right? And we can see it play out on the news. And I guess my reaction, at least to my own family traumas, is to be silly and to like remind people of joy and what play feels like, because it's almost, albeit temporary, can take someone out of that moment. And then when they come back into the real world, like, they may have new skills and different ways to like go about it. And so as I'm hearing your journey, I'm like, man, maybe I should quit my job. No, no, I love y'all. I love y'all. My jobs are great. It's just, we are part of a system too. But there is something like super powerful that you are saying here that is giving me pause, and I'm sure our viewers pause, of like, what does it take to make that leap, and when is enough enough, and like, when are we not going to want to be complicit with these systems anymore, because a lot of people benefit still from them.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I know I don't want to take too much of your time, so I don't know, what's a piece of advice that you would give folks that are watching this conversation?
Yeah, no, like, the joy piece is so important in the play, for us to just reconnect with that part of ourselves. Like you said, it so much of that gets like lost or like socialized out of us as we grow up. And so yeah, just really tapping into that, reconnecting to what brings me joy, like what brings me pleasure, like what are these things, and how do I just tap into like all of the dimensions of who I am. And I want to recognize that there's a level of privilege in being able to do that. And I know that just given where I'm at in my life and educational background and where I'm at career-wise, I have the space and time to tap into that. So I want to recognize that it's not just this thing that happens, or like, yeah, like, and so I'm grateful that I'm able to do that in this moment, and to, yeah, be thinking about all of this. So I think gratitude is another piece, just really like deep gratitude for everything that, where I'm at, and for people like you, and for spaces like this to connect with folks and have these conversations about the world that we want to build and the work that we want to do. So yeah, like leaning into gratitude, leaning into joy, and not shying away from that self-examination and excavation of like, shit, I was doing this, like I was participating in this, and I want to do something different, and it does not feel good for me, it does not feel good for other people, and how can I really like radically reorient myself and be really honest about it. So I think, yeah, really diving into that self-work is
Yeah.
huge. But doing it in community too, right? It's not just an individual journey. I think this myth of individualism that we have in the US is just, I think, so destructive, because like we rely on community, on connection with people. And so I think if we can be in community as much as possible, and having these conversations with others together, because it's a communal impact. So yeah, just staying the course, and yeah, and being committed along the way.
I love it. I love it. Let's I don't want to say end there. It's a comma, not a period. It's a pause. Thank you so much for being on this show
Yes,
here.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Stick around for a minute after. We'll just catch up after for a minute. But I'll tell the viewers goodbye. Thank you all for tuning in. You've been with Zach Ritter and Marisa Ramirez. I hope you learned something from this, and I hope it was liberatory for me, because it made me think about all the things that I'm a part of, and do I want to be a part of these systems, and how can I do some consulting or just see the world as it is now, but then maybe see it from a different view, and add some more joy and some more beauty, because these are hard months, and this has been a hard year, and for some folks it's been a hard 10 years and plus. So just keeping all of that in mind. Joe Brooks, Community Works Institute, thank you for having us. Thank you for letting us be in this space. Everybody check out communityworksinstitute.org, where you could find more deep conversations like this. And you can also find tools that you could bring into your classroom or bring into your administrative boardrooms to make it less toxic and make it more human-centric. And I think that's what we're trying to do with these programs. And so everybody have a beautiful rest of your day, and thank you again for tuning in. Peace.